Welcome to the League 2 final day recap. Not the Top 20 podcast, sponsored by Sky Bet and the Sky Bet EFL Building Foundations Fund. In League 2, there was quite a lot to sort out, and it all shook out in a pretty interesting way. We'll start, maybe we can start anywhere really. Let's start with third place, the final automatic promotion spot. Bromley and MK were battling for the title. Beneath them, Cambridge, Salford and Notts County all had a chance to nick that third automatic promotion spot. How did this play out, George Ellick?
So we started the day with Cambridge in third, 1 point ahead of Salford in fourth, 1 point ahead of Notts County in fifth. Mm-hmm. And we end the day with Cambridge in third, 1 point ahead of Salford in fourth, and 1 point ahead of Notts County in fifth. And that's because they all drew. And there was...
What are the chances of them all drawing? I cannot believe this.
You know, any neutrals who are listening to this would have had a similar experience to us, of following final day.
Yeah.
And there were certain parts of the EFL final day, League 2 relegation, for example, which we'll get on to, League 1 playoff battle, which we've already discussed on our League 1 show, where so much happened during the day that you're kind of working out the permutations and what's happening. In this one, Notts County went ahead and therefore they went third for a bit and then they conceded and that was it. Because Cambridge drew 0-0 with Crewe, Salford drew 0-0 with Crawley, and Notts County drew 1-1. So that was the only... There were 2 goals in the whole day that changed anything, and that was Notts County scoring, going to third, and then conceding, going back to from where they came. They had a goal disallowed, which was significant. Salford had a penalty not given to them for what looked to me like a pretty blatant penalty.
I'm literally watching it as we speak, and it is absolutely absurd that Dan Udo was not awarded a penalty.
Basically, Dan Udo is punished for his first touch being so good that I think the keeper must assume that the defender's got a touch, because he kind of turns on the ball, it's played into him, and he flicks it around and it pops up in the air. And I think because it pops up, the ref must assume that the defender gets a touch when actually he's gone straight through him.
Incredible. They missed so many chances as well, Salford.
But also Cambridge missed lots of chances too. Yeah. It was a game that, you know, those of us watching Soccer Saturday didn't hear much about, which is quite strange given they were getting promoted. But it was because it was 0-0, and they had opportunities. Louis Appere had one in the first half that was saved, and they had chance in the second half too, but couldn't find a way to breach Crewe, which meant just for a very weird, nervy last 10-15 minutes where basically Cambridge knew that if they scored, they would be up. They were already in third, but they would be confirmed promoted to win. But Salford and Notts County knew that if they scored, they would go above Cambridge. And none of them scored. So we have to kind of, I think, ignore today for a second and just appreciate what Cambridge have done, because this is a promotion off the back of a relegation where the club looked at what happened previous to this season and decided to make a pretty punchy call to appoint a former manager in Mark Bonner, someone who'd basically done every job apart from director of football as a new director of football, to work above someone in Neil Harris, who is a veteran ex-player and someone who's been a championship manager. Like the power dynamic between a guy that was never a player, who's only managed in League 1 and League 2, who'd won a league previously with his club and was a local guy. It looked like it was going to go one of two ways, and it's gone incredibly well. We've spoken to Mark Bonner on this podcast about his experiences this season around the January transfer window and how glowing he was about Harris. It feels like a season that's gone from strength to strength, as the plans that they've made and the very kind of clear thinking in terms of recruitment and playing style have been a slow burn rather than necessarily kind of starting the season with a bang. And they finish on 82 points, 5 points off first, and they get over the line again thanks to what has been a remarkable defensive record where they've only conceded 33 goals from 46 games. So that is an amazing platform for success. So yeah, an incredible day for Cambridge fans, and a return to League One where you really feel, and I really feel like they returned to League One in a far better position than they were when they left.
What an absolutely bizarre scenario. All 3 teams drawing. I genuinely can't quite get my head around that. Notts had a goal disallowed correctly towards the end. There'd have been a moment where their fans maybe thought that they were going to nick it. 1-1 draw at home to Bristol Rovers. I mean, they're the first team to stop Bristol Rovers winning for about 2 months, which, probably scant consolation. You're still thinking about the bad news, aren't you? And as for those Salford chances on top of the penalty decision, it's it can cause a lot of discussion for me right now sitting here. Just a kind of reflection on how brilliant these leagues are, how we get to 46 games of a low-scoring sport, and there's still just things that happen with 10 minutes to go, 20 minutes to go that have, or even in injury time, that just completely define, fine margins of success, failure, or otherwise. Cambridge go up. We will do a special episode celebrating their promotion and detailing in a bit more detail what we think they've done well and why they've nicked third. It should be noted that teams that come down from League One to League Two are ordinarily incredibly poor, and quite often, in fact, about 3/4 of them drop straight into the bottom half of League Two. We've seen that this season, for example, and Crawley have bucked that trend, and I think they all deserve a lot of credit, and I hope they have a fantastic bank holiday weekend. The same for Bromley. They've been celebrating for a couple of weeks already, George, but they can do so again with good reason, because Bromley have beaten MK Dons to the League Two title, and when you consider the size of the budgets, what the players will be being paid to play League Two football, for Bromley to have won this league, for Andy Woodman to win the title over, promotion specialist Paul Warne, as we detailed in our MK promotion special this week, absolutely sensational. And for it to be, Ben Thompson scoring the first goal in their win against Walsall, but then Mitch Pinnock and Omar Shomi scoring the second and the third, really does reflect this team, their star players, but more than that, the fact that they've just been a fantastic collective. And with their 87 points, they beat MK to the title. They could only draw at Fleetwood 1-1. The big game in the playoff picture was a straight shootout, really. It was Chesterfield against Swindon. Swindon had the home advantage, but Chesterfield would make the playoffs with a draw or a win. A Swindon win would have seen them make the playoffs. But the two teams went into this game with very different vibes, very different momentum, very different form. And the result very much went to form, George. Chesterfield beating Swindon by 2-1. Chesterfield jump up to 7th, setting up a playoff semi-final with Notts County, their bitter rivals, with whom they had a very spicy game about a month ago. And Swindon finished the season having challenged for automatic promotion for 95% of it in 9th place.
Yeah. Really fun that Chesterfield played Notts County in those two-legged semis. I'm excited for that. And this game kind of went by the book, I would say. When Lee Bonus put Chesterfield 1-0 up, they had been the better team. Middlemas's nice finish after some good work from Jonan down the right-hand side. In first half injury time was against the run of play. It was their second shot of the game. Chesterfield had kind of completely bossed it up to that point. But it did feel like that goal for Swindon buoyed them a bit and kind of got them back believing that they could actually do this. And in the second half, they were the better team, really. Like, they created the better chances, especially having gone behind when it kind of looked like it was getting away from them. Amazing work from Armando Dobra down the left-hand side, like running down the left-hand side, beating the fullback, getting to the byline and putting in a ball for Mark Ande on the line to divert home. And after that, Swindon, launched everything out. Chesterfield couldn't find a way to score. Some decent saves from Boot in the Chesterfield goal. Kept the score at 2-1, but Chesterfield knew that they could concede one goal and it wouldn't matter. So Chesterfield continue their good run. They are a team that finished in the playoffs last season and were beaten over 2 legs by Walsall. They will want to put that right and will feel that their current form level and the fact they finished only 1 point behind Notts County will give them a huge chance to do so. For Swindon, it's just a total disaster, really. They finished 9th. They finished 9th, having been, as you say, in the automatic promotion race until a couple of weeks ago. A funny team where early in the season their record against the worst teams was so strong, but they could never really get past the better teams. But the way that they finished the season, for your manager to go on TalkSport ahead of what is still an incredibly important game where if you win, you're going to get in the top 7, and to say the wheels have fallen off, I think there's only one wheel left on our wagon, is actually ridiculous, to be honest. If I was a Swindon fan, I'd be pretty upset to hear that, unless it was like an attempt to work some kind of reverse psychology to stop trying to kind of get them up for it and let them get themselves up for it. But yeah, one win dating back to the end of March. 3 defeats in their last 4 games. They conceded 11 goals in those 4 games. It's been a shambolic ending to what looked like quite a promising season. But as I mentioned, not to do the whole "I told you so," but like the underlying numbers for a while have been on the slide, a reliance on Drinan for goals, a lot of points won back in kind of February, March time, where games where they weren't very good and weren't better than the opposition and were winning games. And when that's the case, you either have to improve to maintain it, or it's probably going to catch up with you. And in this case, it caught up with them.
George, we did run-in analysis a couple of weeks ago. Swindon had played 40 games at that point. They were fifth, and they had a 8-point cushion to 8th place, an 8-point playoff cushion, if you like. You predicted that they would drop out of the playoffs, and someone commented on YouTube saying, I get that George supports Oxford, but Swindon to not even make the playoffs has to be the most one-eyed piece of punditry since records began. He really shouldn't ever be allowed an opinion when it comes to Swindon Town. I think that was three-eyed. I don't think anyone in the world would have picked Swindon to drop out of the playoffs, and it was ultimately a very good prediction. I want to make the point to anyone listening who's not a Swindon Town fan that them, you might think, oh, well, boo-hoo, you dropped out the playoffs, no big deal, go again next year. There's an incredible amount of uncertainty at Swindon Town, and it's on pitch and off pitch, right? So lest we forget, when Ian Holloway came in last season, they were at an incredibly low ebb and they were relegation threatened. And the job that Holloway did for about 12 months was genuinely sensational on the pitch. Flew up the table, finished well away from relegation fears this season. Right from the start of the season, they were towards the top end of the table. Like a 9th place finish, weirdly, pre-season, I think would be considered
fine.
Decent, fine, like just above average. So let's bear that in mind. They've also finished 7 points above Oldham, so they're still, they're just at the bottom of this chunk of the top 9 teams who are separated by 12 points. There are big concerns off the field around their ownership. Clem Morfuni has some legal issues over in Australia. It is a situation that is difficult to really get to understand fully because of the legal stuff involved with it. But it creates a real feeling of unease. Swindon have had a really difficult decade or so in terms of ownership. And when Clem Morfuni came in, there was a lot of hope that he'd be the one to steady the ship. The ship does not feel steady in any way when it comes to the ownership. And you have to say Holloway's management of the team has kind of reflected the best and the worst, I guess, of Ian Holloway, the manager. The good times were sensational. Aaron Drinan has been unbelievable this season. They had some incredible results in the first half of the season, and they played some brilliant football. But for many months now, the football dropped off a cliff. Holloway's decision-making, his team selection, and how he spoke to the press suddenly became concerning, I guess, for a lot of the fan base, and they will say, well, we kind of saw this coming, particularly in the last few weeks. So a big post-mortem to come when it comes to Swindon. Chesterfield make the playoffs, as mentioned. They'll play Notts County, first leg at Chesterfield. Grimsby dropped down to 7th on final day, and they set up a game against Salford, 2-legged tie in the playoff semi-finals, first leg at Grimsby. Grimsby drew at Tranmere, had the lead in that one. Nathan Smith with a header to equalise for Tranmere. Those playoff matchups we're going to preview properly, probably Wednesday that'll go out, so look forward to that. In-depth look at each of the 4 teams involved, the matchups, the regular season games, some predictions, some betting picks as well in mid-week. Now, Tranmere drew with Grimsby. They survive after one of the great spirals that we've probably ever covered. It hasn't ended in promotion. They have stayed up by 2 points. Even if they'd lost to Grimsby, they would have been fine. We've already talked about Crawley Town. They drew at home to Salford by, it was 0-0, by hook, by crook, by referees not giving penalties, by Jacob Chapman making incredible saves, by Salford attackers missing good chances. They get a point, they survive. Now, even if they'd lost that game, in the end, they would have stayed up on goal difference because, George, down at the bottom of League 2, where 5 teams could have gone down on final day, it was the 2 that started the day in the bottom 2 who both lost and get relegated. Barrow lost at home to Newport. We kind of knew that Barrow were up against it, or as good as down. But in the end, the game state was beneficial for Newport, who won that game. And I guess the big news really is that Harrogate lost at home to Barnet, and Harrogate and Barrow relegated from League 2.
Yeah, there might have been a moment when Barrow were 1-0 up and had a penalty early in the second half where they thought, maybe? But no, especially given that Crawley were drawing 0-0 with Salford at that point. So they were beaten by Newport. Newport were in the bottom 2 for the majority of the day, because as soon as they went 1-0 down against Barrow, and with Harrogate drawing with Barnet and with Crawley drawing with Salford, it meant that Newport were coming, or at that moment were 23rd. So, I think the headline here is credit to Newport. Again, having spent most of the season in the bottom two, having forced their way out, but then again with 15 minutes of the game left, still, needing to get at least one goal in order to ensure that they were going to be an EFL team next season. They did it again. What Christian Fuchs has done at Newport, I just think is incredible. Absolutely remarkable for him to come in, someone who'd never managed before. Obviously, someone as a player who'd was a Premier League footballer, but his arrival at Newport seemed bizarre when he turned up. A name from nowhere, a name who, it's not often that you get former Premier League winners and Premier League players pitching up at the bottom end of League Two anyway. And very quickly managed to find a way to just make them a much more functional side without much recruitment. You look at Harrogate, who are down, who recruited heavily in January. With Newport's case, it felt like it was just the kind of the Fuchs factor, I guess. And yet again, they managed to find a way to get over the line. So not only did it improve their quality, but also just gave them that ability to win games, which is what they did here. Davis scored the equaliser to get them back in it. And then Camwa, who's been the protagonist in this remarkable last few weeks, did what he's done a few times and got the ball on the left-hand side, stood up the full-back, shimmied onto his right foot and then fired it into the top right-hand corner to give Newport all 3 points. Amazing for them, amazing for their fans. An incredible 20 minutes that took them from oblivion back to where they want to be, and I'm quite excited to see what happens next season now with Newport County and Christian Fuchs. For Harrogate, it's the opposite, where they, again, they got themselves in a position to stay up. Bryn Morris tucked home a penalty that I thought was a bit soft. We're seeing these penalties quite a lot now, where a player will kind of kick the ball past the defender and then you kind of poleaxe them and go down. Often if you're not trying to make a challenge to play the ball, then I don't see why it's necessarily a penalty. But it was given and it was converted, and Harrogate were okay off the back of that. It was a pretty tight game. But it was Barnet who got the winner late on in the game. Chinedu, the young centre-back, popping up with kind of 10 minutes or so to go to win it. And that was the goal that relegated them. Had they not conceded that goal and drawn the game, they still would have been relegated. And it's sad. It's sad to say goodbye to Harrogate, a team who, have punched above their weight to get here in the first place. Another team to show that when a well-run National League club force their way in, they can be a decent League Two team, which is what they've been under Simon Weaver for a long time. There are similarities, I guess, in some ways to Bromley in terms of the way that they came up, and then the style of play to an extent. But Bromley have now managed to win League Two, whereas Harrogate, as is often the case, if the longer that you consolidate, but the players that look more adept to staying at the level get picked off, it's very hard to compete, and that's what's happened to them. So disappointing for them, of course, and heartbreak. But but with Harrogate and Barrow going down, often we see teams go down where you're like, well, I'm sure we'll see them back soon. But with Harrogate and Barrow, it feels like they'll have to kind of punch up again in order to get there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if Simon Weaver and the manager, and then his dad, who's obviously the owner and the chairman, it would be really interesting to track Harrogate over the next few years and see if this is the end of an era for them. Obviously, an era that saw them essentially rise from being a kind of regional team to an EFL team for the last few seasons. I've enjoyed. I mean, they finished 17th, 19th, 19th, 13th, 18th. And now relegated, so really found it difficult never made the top half of League Two, like a lot of clubs that come up from the National League seem to find a little bit easier. Kind of always seem to try and keep small, tight squads, maybe pay a bit more average wage for fewer players, and therefore benefited from that probably in the good seasons. But I think the problem is if you do have a relatively short squad, if you like, then injuries or poor form or not quite landing on the right blend or not quite building the right relationships can be really difficult. And it's clear when you look at their team this season, they have literally had 3 regular players, and that is Bryn Morris, Rhys Evans, Jack Evans, who can all basically hold their heads high. Evans and Smith in particular have been really, really good. Bryn Morris is a good player at this level. The next most games played is Jacob Slater with 31. And then it's a jump to Anthony O'Connor, who's made 24 starts. So you can just see that they just never quite found the group that you need. And frankly, to lose 10 home league games in a row, as they did between October and the start of February, they went winless in over 20 games in the league. Like, actually, if that team stays up, then it's slightly ridiculous. So I think that's kind of the key thing there. You know, all of these teams, it's funny, the difference in kind of narrative and feeling. Like for Newport, there will be joy, there will be a sense of achievement. And I have no issue with that. I think they should feel a sense of achievement. For Crawley and Tranmere, it's much more a sense of like, good God, this has been a horrible season. We've been way worse than we should have been. The vibes have been pretty horrendous on a number of levels, and we've stayed up, but we don't feel great about it. I mean, Crawley should be proud that today they kept a clean sheet against Salford, I guess. Like, that is an achievement to a certain extent, but both of those teams, Crawley and Tranmere, will need to have a long, hard look at themselves in the mirror to make sure that nothing like this season happens again, because otherwise they will be part of the same discussion and battle next season.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, if you're a fan of those clubs, they would agree. Tranmere are kind of have been in this limbo with the buyout, with the new owners that seems to have rumbled on forever. Is ASAP Rocky still knocking around?
That was done. Yeah,
but that's my point. Is then like we've been talking about Tranmere being bought for 2 years. If the Palios are still in charge, it's been quite a long time since they've been competitive at the level. We know that it's difficult for clubs, you know, people who maybe formerly could have been able to support clubs. The amount of money you need to lose now means it's not as appealing to them. And I would hazard a guess that the Palioses don't want to lose the kind of money needed to compete at the top end of League Two, which is understandable and why they're trying to sell the club. Similarly, we've got a Crawley owner who was part of the previous consortium, but then, you know, took majority ownership last summer, who's probably learned quite a lot over the last season. So yeah, I mean, I get your point that this can't happen again, but I'm struggling to see unless there's kind of material change where it won't happen again. Like I you know, unless there's a new owner at Tranmere, are they going to invest in the way they need to improve the squad? In Pete Wild, they've got a manager who I'd probably back to, you know, with the summer to make them much more competitive. With Crawley, you know, Colin Kazim-Richards, who's come in and done fine. It certainly wasn't the disaster that some thought it would be. It certainly wasn't quite as spectacularly good as maybe some hoped it would be. So you know, this isn't a West Brom situation or you know, teams who have no right to be in a relegation battle. I kind of you know, maybe in Tranmere's case to a degree, but even so, it, you know, material change I think has to happen at both to expect anything better. Yeah,
40 points from a 46-game league season for Crawley. They're fortunate not to be dropping down. In most other divisions, with 3 down, obviously they would be. Elsewhere on the beach, Oldham beat Aki 3-0 to finish 10th in their return to the EFL, to League 2. Really solid finish from Oldham. Obviously, 4 defeats in a row before this game. They end the season 10 points off the playoffs. So, yeah, probably about where they should be. There were some times in the season where it looked like they could be better. But they rallied after a fairly slow start, and I think they can be probably quite excited about heading into next season. And Cheltenham lost 4-1 at home to Colchester. That means Colchester jumped above Walsall for a top half spot to finish 12th, Walsall 13th on 65. Gillingham beat Shrews by a goal to nil. Gareth Ainsworth getting one over his former team there. The final League Two table, Bromley top 87, MK Dons second 86, then Cambridge United rounding off the automatic promotion places on 82 points. Salford 81, Notts 80, Chesterfield 79, Grimsby 78. That's quite neat. Just a point between each of the 4 playoff teams, and we'll be previewing that in midweek. Barnet just outside, 2 points off in the end after a strong finish to the season. Swindon in 9th after a very poor end to the season. Oldham 10th, Crewe 11th, Col U 12th, Walsall 13th, Bristol Rovers end up 14th with Fleetwood 15th, Aki 16th and Gills 17th. Cheltenham finish 18th, Shrewsbury Town 19th, and then Newport 20th, Tranmere 21st, Crawley 22nd, and relegated to the National League, Harrogate and Barrow. It's been an absolute treat of a League Two regular season. It's kept us on our toes throughout. Hope you've enjoyed listening to our League Two content all season. Same again next year, but first the League Two playoffs. There'll be plenty to discuss on that front. Cheers and go well.